Imagine walking into a dealership tomorrow and seeing a Jeep Wrangler or a Ram 1500 sitting there with a sticker price slashed by half. Not a clearance sale, not a limited time rebate, but an across-the-board, jaw-dropping cut so massive that it sends shockwaves through the entire auto industry. That's exactly what's unfolding right now. Jeep and Ram just dropped a bombshell that nobody saw coming. And it's not just about moving a few trucks off the lot. This is a calculated strike designed to completely change the game. Think about it. Models that were once creeping past $60,000 are suddenly dipping into the low $30,000 range. We're talking about vehicles that were previously priced out of reach for many buyers, now suddenly within striking distance of everyday families, first-time truck owners, and even people who never thought they'd step into a Jeep or a Ram. But here's where it gets even more shocking. The reason behind this move isn't as straightforward as it looks. This isn't generosity, it isn't kindness from the automakers. This is desperation meeting strategy, and it could signal the start of a pricing war that will pull in Ford, GM, Toyota, and maybe even disrupt the entire SUV and pickup truck market. And if you think this is only about moving a few extra vehicles, think again, because this kind of slash cuts deeper into dealer profits, reshapes used car values overnight, and might even leave some automakers scrambling to survive. The ripple effect is already starting to show. Dealers who just a few months ago were adding markups and pushing buyers into long financing terms are suddenly in full panic mode. Picture rows of unsold trucks sitting under the hot sun, collecting dust, with sales managers quietly admitting that demand has cooled far faster than they expected. Now, with Jeep and Ram slicing prices in half, those same dealerships are left with no choice but to follow the lead or risk drowning in their own inventory. And here's the kicker: this isn't happening in a vacuum. The auto market right now is a pressure cooker. Rising interest rates, buyers holding back, and an oversupply of trucks that just aren't moving at the pace automakers predicted. So instead of waiting for a collapse, Jeep and Ram decided to pull the trigger first. They've taken the gamble that by gutting prices, they can dominate the market share before rivals even realize what hit them. But this move also raises a massive question: what happens to the people who just bought a Jeep or Ram at full price last year? Their vehicles just lost thousands in value overnight, and that kind of sudden shift can fuel frustration, lawsuits, and even long-term brand damage. Yet for new buyers, this is a golden ticket moment, the kind of rare opportunity that could let them drive away in a top-tier truck for the price of a base model compact SUV. And here's where things get even more intense: the first models to see these jaw-dropping cuts are not the slow sellers you'd expect, but some of Jeep and Ram's most popular nameplates. The Jeep Wrangler, the Gladiator, and Ram's Bread and Butter 1500 pickups are right at the center of this price revolution. Why? Because these are the halo products, the ones that set the tone for the entire brand. By slicing their prices, Jeep and Ram aren't just clearing out aging inventory, they're sending a message to every competitor and every beer in America: we're willing to burn the house down to win back the market. And the strategy is ruthless. Instead of letting Ford's F-150 or Chevy's Silverado dominate the sales charts, Stellantis, the parent company behind Jeep and Ram, has decided to undercut them so aggressively that even loyal brand buyers are forced to stop and think twice. Imagine walking into a Ford dealership, looking at a $65,000 F-150, then crossing the street and seeing a Ram 1500 for half that price. The math doesn't even require negotiation, it's a no-brainer. But this move could set off a chain reaction, the likes of which the industry hasn't seen in decades, because Ford, GM, and Toyota won't just sit back and watch their market share evaporate. If Stellantis forces their hand, we could be staring down the biggest truck and SUV price war in modern history. And when a price war starts in the truck and SUV segment, the impact doesn't just stay with the big three. It trickles down to every corner of the automotive landscape. Used car lots suddenly find themselves upside down because trucks they bought at auction just weeks ago are now worth thousands less. Leasing companies panic as residual values collapse, forcing them to eat massive losses at the end of contracts. Even insurance companies start recalculating risk, because the cost to replace these vehicles has shifted overnight. And here's the twist most buyers don't see: while Jeep and Ram are dangling these massive discounts as if they're gifts, the automaker is betting that the volume spike will more than make up for the lost margins. They want more trucks. On the road, more visibility, more dominance in a segment where reputation is everything. But it's a dangerous gamble, because if Ford or Chevy decide to counter with even modest discounts, the entire pricing floor of the industry could collapse. That means the vehicles that once symbolized status, power, and exclusivity like a fully loaded Ram Limited or a Jeep Rubicon could suddenly become mainstream daily drivers for middle-class families, and once the perception shifts, once these trucks are seen as affordable rather than aspirational, there's no going back. Which brings us to the real heart of the story, the psychology of the beer. For years, truck and SUV prices have been climbing higher and higher, almost daring customers to stretch their budgets with 7-year loans and sky-high monthly payments. Automakers got comfortable, believing buyers would just keep swallowing the price hikes because that's the cost of owning a truck. But now, Jeep and Ram have shattered that illusion. Suddenly, consumers who felt priced out are being pulled back into showrooms, and they're not just buying, they're demanding more. They're asking why trucks ever had to cost $70,000 in the first place. They're questioning dealer fees, markups, and inflated add-ons that became the norm during the shortage years. And this shift in mindset is dangerous for every other brand, because once people realize trucks can and should be sold for less, the artificial bubble that's been propping up the auto industry starts to deflate. This isn't just about affordability, it's about exposing the truth behind years of padded margins and inflated sticker prices. And for the first time in a long time, the power dynamic between automakers and buyers is tilting back toward the consumer. And the timing couldn't be more critical. With the economy tightening, interest rates still stubbornly high, and buyers holding their wallets closer than ever, this move by Jeep and Ram feels less like a discount and more like a lifeline thrown into the market. Families who were once resigned to buying smaller crossovers or even holding on to their aging vehicles now see a chance to upgrade into a full-size truck or rugged SUV without bankrupting themselves. That shift alone could trigger a surge of demand unlike anything we've seen since the early 2000s truck boom. But here's the catch: if too many people rush in at once, dealers could face an entirely new problem: shortages of these discounted models, leading to waitlists and fierce competition just to snag one at the reduced price. And that, in turn, could create chaos in the used market, as buyers who miss out start hunting for nearly new Wranglers and Rams, driving values back up in unpredictable ways. It's a delicate balance. Jeep and Ram are trying to spark a fire without letting it burn out of control, but once this kind of pricing grenade goes off, you can't put the pin back in. And while all of this is happening on the consumer side, the boardrooms of rival automakers are in full-blown crisis mode. Ford executives are crunching numbers, wondering how long they can keep pushing the F-150 at premium prices before their loyal base starts defecting. GM is staring at the Silverado and Sierra lineup, realizing that if they don't respond quickly, their carefully built profit margins could evaporate. Even Toyota, usually the calm and calculated player with the Tundra and Tacoma, can't ignore the tidal wave, because if Stellantis proves that a 50% slash can spark a sales frenzy, Toyota's slow and steady strategy might suddenly look outdated. Behind closed doors, meetings are being held, strategies rewritten, and marketing campaigns retooled, all because Jeep and Ram threw the first punch. And here's the chilling part: this isn't a one-time play. If Stellantis decides to make these cuts a long-term strategy, it could permanently lower the ceiling for what Americans are willing to pay for trucks and SUVs. That means billions of dollars in lost revenue across the industry, factories running overtime to keep up with demand, and a total reset of the pricing structure that automakers have spent the last decade inflating. And it doesn't stop there, because Wall Street is already paying attention. Investors who once praised automakers for their sky-high profit margins are now staring down the possibility of shrinking returns, and their nervous stock values could swing wildly as analysts debate whether this move is genius or reckless. If sales skyrocket, Stellantis looks like a visionary that outsmarted the competition. But if the gamble backfires, if margins collapse faster than volume rises, Jeep and Ram could find themselves bleeding cash at a pace that no discount can fix. And let's not forget the global angle. Stellantis isn't just playing this game in the US, they're eyeing international markets too, where competition from Chinese automakers like BYD and Great Wall is already undercutting Western brands. By slashing prices here at home, Stellantis is signaling to the world that they're ready to fight on every front. But that fight comes with risk, and the question hanging over the entire industry is this: who blinks first? Will Ford or GM cave and match the cuts? Or will they dig in and hope Jeep and Ram burn themselves out? Either way, the standoff has begun, and the longer it drags on, the more volatile the market becomes, and while the automakers wrestle with strategy, it's the dealerships that are caught in the crossfire. Many of them built their entire business model on fat margins, extended warranties, and overpriced add-ons. Now, with Jeep and Ram cutting prices, those same dealers are scrambling to rework their playbook. Imagine a sales floor where the old tactics markups, limited supply pitches, high-pressure financing suddenly collapse because buyers know the true value has been exposed. Some dealers will adapt quickly, slashing their own fees and hustling to move volume, but others will resist, trying to cling to the old way of doing business. That tension is going to create a bizarre marketplace where some buyers score once in a lifetime deals while others still get gouged by dealerships unwilling to change. And the longer this plays out, the more chaotic the system becomes because word spreads fast. Social media will explode with people bragging about getting a brand new Ram for half the price, fueling a frenzy that pushes even more buyers into showrooms. It's a feedback loop that Stellantis is counting on, but one that could spiral out of control faster than anyone expected. And here's where things get really unpredictable: the aftermarket and accessory industry. For years, companies selling lift kits, custom wheels, performance exhausts, and off-road gear have thrived because buyers who paid top dollar for their trucks wanted to make them stand out even more. But now, with tens of thousands of people able to buy into Jeep and Ram ownership at half the price, the customization boom could explode overnight. Imagine thousands of Wranglers and Ram 1500s hitting the streets in the hands of new owners eager to personalize them, flooding the aftermarket with demand like we haven't seen in a decade. But at the same time, the very identity of these vehicles starts to shift. They're no longer just aspirational toys for enthusiasts, they're suddenly attainable for the average commuter, the family hauler, the weekend adventurer who never thought they could afford one. That transformation could either strengthen Jeep and Ram's cultural dominance or water it down, making them feel less special in a market where exclusivity once drove loyalty. And if the sense of exclusivity erodes, then the long-term brand power Jeep and Ram have carefully cultivated for decades could face a slow, quiet collapse beneath the surface. And yet, that might be exactly what Stellantis wants. Because if Jeep and Ram shift from being exclusive lifestyle brands into mass-market heavyweights, they're playing an entirely different game, one where volume matters more than prestige. Think about it, the Wrangler and Ram 1500 have always carried a certain image, tied to freedom, toughness, and individuality. But what happens when those same vehicles are suddenly as common on suburban streets as compact crossovers? Stellantis could be betting that ubiquity is more valuable than mystique. By flooding the roads with affordable Jeeps and Rams, they create brand dominance that's impossible for rivals to ignore. Every neighborhood, every job site, every highway suddenly becomes rolling advertising. But here's the dangerous edge of that sort: once a product loses its aura of scarcity, the resale values plunge even further, and loyalists who once took pride in paying premium prices may start to feel betrayed. That tension between attracting new buyers and keeping old ones loyal could define the next chapter of this unfolding price war. Because if Stellantis miscalculates, they don't just risk losing profit margins, they risk alienating the very core of their identity as brands built on toughness, heritage, and loyalty. And that's where the cracks could begin to show, because brand identity isn't something you can buy back once it slips away. Jeep, for decades, has thrived on the mythology of adventure, of ruggedness, of belonging to a select group of drivers who see their vehicles as more than just transportation. Ram, meanwhile, has carved out a reputation for power, work ethic, and luxury blended into a truck. But when those same vehicles are suddenly available for half the price, that mythology risks being diluted. Hardcore Jeep loyalists who once bragged about paying top dollar for a Rubicon may suddenly feel like their badge of honor has been cheapened. Ram owners who value the exclusivity of a premium trim could start to see their trucks parked in every driveway on the block. And while this democratization of pricing is a win for consumers, it throws the long-term strategy of these brands into dangerous territory. Because heritage and loyalty are fragile currencies in the auto world. Once broken, they don't repair easily, and as Stellantis chases volume, the big question becomes whether they can hold onto the soul of Jeep and Ram, or whether this gamble will leave them with sales spikes today, but an identity crisis tomorrow. And here's the irony: while Stellantis risks unraveling its own legacy, the short-term success might be too tempting to resist. If showroom traffic explodes, if quarterly sales reports show record-breaking numbers, investors and executives will celebrate the move as a masterstroke, even if it comes at the cost of long-term brand equity. That's the trap of the modern auto industry. Wall Street rewards immediate wins, not future stability. And so, Jeep and Ram could find themselves locked into a cycle where deeper and deeper discounts become the new normal, because once buyers taste 50% off, how do you ever convince them to pay full price again? It's the Pandora's box of pricing, easy to open, nearly impossible to close. Meanwhile, rivals are watching closely, knowing that if Stellantis succeeds, they'll be forced to follow, and if Stellantis fails, they'll inherit a market filled with confused and angry buyers. Either way, this move doesn't just change the price tag on a few trucks, it changes consumer expectations across the board. And once expectations shift, the entire market reshapes around them, whether the automakers are ready or not. And that's exactly why this moment feels less like a discount event and more like a turning point in automotive history. For decades, automakers have conditioned buyers to accept higher and higher prices by packaging luxury features, advanced tech, and flashy trims into vehicles that were once simple workhorses. But with one slash of the red pen, Jeep and Ram have pulled the curtain back, showing just how much flexibility there really is in those inflated MSRPs. It's a wake-up call to every consumer who ever felt pressured into stretching beyond their budget, and it's a nightmare for every brand that's built its profits on that model. Because the second buyers realize that half-price trucks are possible, they won't just demand lower prices from Stellantis, they'll demand them from everyone. And that consumer awakening could be the most dangerous ripple effect of all. Because once people know they've been overpaying for years, trust in the entire industry begins to erode. And once that trust is shaken, it doesn't come back easily. Buyers will walk into dealerships with a whole new mindset, no longer asking what's the best deal I can get, but instead demanding why should I pay that much at all. That subtle shift puts dealers and automakers on the defensive, forcing them to justify every dollar on the sticker instead of hiding behind supply shortages or inflated demand. It could even reshape how people shop for vehicles altogether, pushing more buyers toward direct-to-consumer sales models, online marketplaces, and even subscription-style ownership, where transparency is higher and pricing games are harder to play. And if that happens, Jeep and Ram won't just be remembered as the brands that cut prices in half. They'll be remembered as the spark that set off a revolution in how cars and trucks are bought and sold. But revolutions are messy, and the fallout could claim more than just profits. It could permanently change the balance of power between automakers, dealers, and the people who've been footing the bill all along, the everyday drivers. And here's where the story takes an even sharper turn, because everyday drivers aren't just passive participants anymore. Social media has given them a megaphone, and when word of these 50% price cut spreads, it won't just stay in car forums or dealership reviews. TikTok videos, Instagram Reels, YouTube testimonials, millions of eyeballs will see real buyers bragging about stealing a brand new Ram or Jeep for prices that sound too good to be true. That kind of viral momentum can't be controlled once it takes off, and it forces competitors into a corner. Ford, GM, Toyota, they won't just be competing in showrooms. They'll be competing in the court of public opinion, where silence looks like weakness, stubbornly high prices look like greed. And once the narrative turns against them, even their most loyal customers may start questioning their loyalty. Suddenly, the brand wars aren't about horsepower, towing capacity, or luxury features. They're about who's on the side of the beer and who's clinging to outdated profit models. And in that kind of battle, perception can be just as powerful as reality. And perception spreads faster than any rebate program or glossy ad campaign ever could. If buyers start to see Jeep and Ram as the people's brands, the ones willing to shatter the status quo, then loyalty shifts overnight. A Ford or Chevy driver who once swore they'd never cross the aisle might suddenly find themselves tempted, not because they fell in love with a new design, but because they feel respected for the first time in years. That's the kind of emotional swing money can't buy, and it's exactly what Stellantis is gambling on, turning frustration with overpriced vehicles into fuel for a new wave of conquest sales. But the flip side is just as real. If consumers begin to view the cuts not as generosity, but as proof that they've been gouged for years, resentment could grow. Instead of celebrating Jeep and Ram, some might turn on the entire industry, demanding investigations, stricter regulations, or even government oversight into how vehicles are priced. And if that conversation gains traction, what started as a bold pricing move could spiral into a reckoning that reshapes not only how much cars cost, but who decides what they're worth in the first place. And that reckoning might already be closer than the industry wants to admit. Lawmakers have been circling the auto market for years, questioning dealer markups, hidden fees, and ballooning loan terms that trap families in debt. Now, with Jeep and Ram proving that prices can be cut in half and the companies still stay afloat, regulators may start asking the uncomfortable question: were consumers being overcharged all along? Imagine congressional hearings where executives are pressed to explain why a pickup truck needed to cost $70,000 last year but can suddenly sell for $35,000 today. Imagine watchdog groups seizing on this moment to demand transparency in pricing structures, exposing just how much of the cost was profit padding versus true manufacturing expense. If that spotlight shines too brightly, it won't just be Stellantis on the defensive, it'll be the entire industry, from Detroit to Tokyo. And once the public sees the inner workings of auto pricing laid bare, trust may never return to the way it was before this bombshell dropped. And if that trust never returns, the entire foundation of the modern car market begins to crack. Because the industry has always relied on a careful illusion, convincing buyers that prices climb because of innovation, because of rising costs, because of progress. But now the mask has slipped, and people are starting to realize that what they were really paying for was corporate strategy, not necessity. Once that awareness spreads, it reshapes everything. Buyers delay purchases, waiting for inevitable discounts, dealerships lose leverage in negotiations, and automakers are forced into a race to the bottom just to keep customers coming through the door. And here's the most chilling part: once consumers are trained to expect 50% off, the full-price beer disappears almost overnight. That means the old model of limited incentives and high sticker prices may be gone for good, replaced by an era where the real battle isn't over who builds the best truck, but who's willing to sell it for the lowest price. And that shift could completely rewrite the DNA of the vehicles themselves.